There almost is no end in sight for that because we're in such a deflationary period right now. What do you make of that thesis?
That could be true in the short run, maybe in the next 1, 2, or 3 years. But if the U.S. continue to accumulate deficits and the debt, and after several years, the debt will be at a much higher level. And also, if we do have some kind of global economic recovery, there would be a decline for the demand for the U.S. Treasury bonds, and that might force the rise of interest rate in the U.S. and therefore make the U.S. debt situation much less sustainable.
It does not look like anything is going to change in the United States in terms of higher wages. If anything, wages are going down, the worse unemployment gets.
Unfortunately.
So then we will be heading, whether it's 2 years or 3 years, towards this wall where you could say you can't increase the deficit any further without vastly debasing the currency. Is this a debate going on in China? What I mean by that is there a point where China loses faith in the American economy? Or on the other hand, are the two economies so enmeshed with each other, they're both in the same boat?
Well, the basic problem for the Chinese economy right now is that it seems the Chinese leadership cannot quite make up their mind. And on the one hand, they are still hoping that eventually the U.S. will come back so they could again see a rapid increase of exports to the U.S. And on the other hand, they to some extent realize that this cannot go on forever. And so then you need to increase domestic consumption, but they don't want to do the massive income redistribution required for that. So they are not sure how to sustain the expansion of domestic demand.
To what extent is China debating, and when Obama meets with Chinese leaders, do they say to him, we're not sure whether we have faith in the long-term viability of your economy? Do they say that, or are they kind of so in such a similar situation? I mean, a lot of people have suggested China's kind of, to some extent, decoupling in this crisis. They've talked to how GDP continues to grow in China, and that maybe the Chinese economy is not so dependent on the American market anymore.
Right now, China has come out of this crisis relatively well, sustaining a growth rate of 8 to 9% a year, but that is largely based on the massive increase in bank loans, and which in turn goes to infrastructure investment, and that, however, could lead to excess capacity in a few years. And also some of the investment goes to the real estate sector, so there are people who are concerned about possible asset bubble in the real estate sector.
So you're talking about government stimulus
these are potential
money.
Risks.
This is state or government stimulus money you're talking about.
Right.
And to what extent is this growth dependent on that stimulus money? I mean, is it a case that when the stimulus money runs out, the economy starts to sputter or not?
Well, it's the latest statistics suggest that for the first 3 quarters of this year, about 95% of the growth is coming from fixed investment. And so if this fixed investment cannot be sustained, there will be real trouble.
Can you imagine a world in the next 5 or 10 years that simply adjusts to this situation, which is high 10, 15% unemployment in the United States, relatively low wages, not that much consumer debt because of the crisis in the finance side? People don't want to lend and give credit. And the rest of the world kind of readjusts and moves on based on the domestic market in India and China and Europe. I mean, is this a real possibility, or does it all really is it all so intertwined right now it heads towards another global crisis?
Well, of course, one possibility is that it will just head to another crisis. But if we think about relatively optimistic scenario, and in the U.S., and we may have the consumers to increase saving, but on the other hand, because of the government deficit cannot be sustained forever, the U.S. and maybe Europe will suffer from stagnation but not collapse in the coming years. And on the other hand, China will be able to sustain its growth through massive increase in investment. And so long as Chinese economy is growing rapidly, it will increase imports of machines and equipment from Japan, Europe. It will increase imports of raw materials, energy from Latin America, from Middle East. So that may contribute to relatively rapid growth in the global economy for some years. But the question is, when China's investment cannot be sustained because of excess capacity, and also if the China's rapid growth of energy demand cannot be met by the constrained world energy supply, especially there's a concern about the world oil production may have peaked, and then that may lead to the next crisis.
So, but you could have for a time a situation where American capital decides, well, we can make so much money in Asia, we don't have to worry so much about domestic purchasing power in the United States. I saw on television a documentary the other day about Walmart, and it turns out Walmart, within I think it's 3 or 4 years, expects to have as many stores in China as in the United States, not just producing in China, but they're selling into the Chinese market. They may actually surpass the number of stores in China than the United States. I mean, you could have a situation where the American capital says, listen, we'll make money where the expansion is, and, excuse my language, screw the American workers.
Well, then in that case, obviously you will have a divergence of interest between the U.S. corporations and the great majority of the U.S. population, and that unfortunately will make a progressive change in the U.S. even less likely.
Well, you could have a situation where American workers have to decide they better do something to defend themselves, or they're going to be in real trouble here.
Right, yeah.